So you've been in New York the whole time, and I'd have to think starting in New York, it's very difficult, I'd assume, and just the amount of like crazy offers I think you'd get, and just you're so hungry for stage time, you take things that looking back, you're probably like, what was I thinking? And
Right, right.
you,
But
what,
one of the benefits is like I think that a lot of people see it that way, but I think you only see it that way because you're so far into it that now you know what to fear. But when you start off, you don't even know what to fear.
you have
So
no gauge, no.
no gauge. So if you just start in like a city like New York that's like super competitive and way different to start, you just feel like, oh, this is just what it is. This is how everyone starts. This
Yeah,
is comedy. You
right,
don't know that there's people in like Texas that are doing open mics in front of 200 people, like
right,
for shows.
exactly,
You
yeah,
don't even think about that. Like you don't know that. You think everyone's doing what you're doing.
yeah. That,
So starting off, like that was the thing. Like I never thought about it. I didn't even know what I was doing was crazy until years later when I met more people and I learned more about comedy. I remember like doing comedy like I was like 2 years in or maybe two and a half, close to 3 years in, and I did my first road gig. It was in Jersey at Bananas Comedy Club.
yeah.
They had me host for one night, and I went and host. It was like a Thursday. They were doing a 3 day, but I was only supposed to host Thursday, so I went and hosted Thursday, and it was fine. It was great. It was my first like road thing. I was super excited. Then the next day, I get a call from the club from an agent that they said the club called them and said that they had Dave Attell coming that weekend, and he asked, would I want to go open for him? And I'm like, yeah, for sure. Like, but I didn't even think about the magnitude. And I remember doing that weekend, and it was like 300. I did like 4 shows, 300 people of Attell fans who are like comedy. Like
Right.
Attell fans are not like they want comedy. That's what they're there for. And looking back at it, like if I were to get that now, I probably would be nervous. But at that time,
Yeah,
I
you don't even have
wasn't nervous.
to think about it. And
No, at that time I was just like, yeah, I'll go open for a tell. What, 10 minutes? That's easy. Meanwhile, I had like five.
right, yeah, yeah.
You just don't even think about it.
When you're new and they're like, how much time you can you do? And they're like, can you feel like 30? And it's like, sure, yeah, I can do 30, no problem. And
Dude, sometimes I wish I could go back to that naiveness,
yeah,
to the naiveness of not knowing what to fear. So you just go with it.
that's a great point because we're so conditioned now to be like, I don't know about that. I don't know, like looking over our shoulder all the time.
Right.
That
Yeah,
we're
right.
being a kid where you're like, just go play. Just go.
Right. I feel like with more stuff that I've done, I've gotten more soft.
Yeah. That
Like now, like I'll still do anything and I'll still ride it out. But like I feel like my attitude going into it, before I was just always like, this is great. Like I don't like, but now I'll be like, this is gonna suck. Like I don't know about this. Like just because you learn what to fear.
when as soon as you have something, once you start doing shows that are really good, as soon as you go back to that bad like venue or stage or setup, you're like, ugh, this
Right,
sucks. It's like, but this is
right,
all we knew. Like for a
right,
time, we didn't have it great, so we just
right,
enjoyed this. What do
right.
you think the craziest venue you performed in New York?
Um, venue, I would say probably just like probably. I remember one time I performed in like this Mexican restaurant in Queens, where my friend booked it. Like I didn't even know. Like it was just one of those friends that like he was a friend from high school, and like they just hear you doing comedy, and they just think that you're like a headliner. They think you're like, oh, so just come do my. They think you're like a headliner that can sell out a room.
Right.
So they so
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so he booked me to do some show in Queens at this Mexican restaurant, and I knew that it would be sketchy. Like I knew by like how he was talking to me about like the show. I knew that he never had put a show together before, and I knew it was sketchy. So I asked one, and mind you, at this time I'm an open micer. Like I'm not. I've been doing comedy maybe 2.5 years. I'm a straight up open micer. That's what I do. I mean, I do shows here and there, but just open mics is my thing. And I remember I asked another friend of mine, an open micer. I was like, hey, do you want to come ride out? Like, cause he was paying me like, I think like $100, something like that. And I asked my friend, I was like, hey, do you want to come ride out with me to Queens? You do like, I'm supposed to headline this show. I know he's not gonna book another comic, so I'll bring you, and you could just open. You could do some time in front of me. He was like, yeah, sure. We would just open micers. Like we didn't know, like
Right.
we were like, yeah, anything for stage time. And for him, I felt like it might have been like his first paid gig too.
Oh my
Um, so it was definitely my first like high paid gig, but like not high, by high I mean like $100. But
yeah, which is a lot of money when you're just doing open mics.
when you're paying $5 to do open mics, yeah, getting $100 is a lot.
Yeah.
So we went out there, but like most shows, like most things in comedy, and no matter how many times this happens, we will always, our mentality never changes. We think it's gonna be the worst thing in the world, and then you do it, and you're like, this is not that bad.
Right.
So when I got there, I remember there was only like 4 people there, and I was like, oh boy, this is gonna be terrible. They had like a DJ, and the dude, my boy, he's like, yeah, so like we could get started whenever you want. And I'm like, start, like there's only 4 people here, and he had hired me to do like 30, which I didn't have 10.
Right.
I didn't have 10 solid minutes, and I was like, yeah, I'll do 30. And my friend went up, and he did about 15, 20, and as he was up there, like more people started coming in, and he was like actually doing well. Like, cause like sometimes that's what you need. You need to see somebody else go up and do okay. So you're like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
So he went up, he did like 15, 20, and he was doing well with the 4 people, but then it went filling up. By the time he got on stage and brought me up, it was like 25 people there. Like when I lit him, it was like 25 people there. It was packed. So I went up there and I did like, that was at the time was the longest I did. I think I did like 45, 50 minutes just because I was vibing with the crowd work and with the crowd and stretching out my material. And it turned out to be like a great time. Like it was the first time that I did like a long extended set. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like I was just used to doing 5 minutes, 10 at the most at that point.
Yeah, and it's always nice when it works out like that, where you go and you're like, this is going to be good, and then it's great. But on the other side of that, I'm sure you've had it where you're like, why wouldn't this be good? Like, it's in a club, it's in a nice venue, the crowd seems great, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the show just like goes off the rails, and you're like, at the end of that, you're like, what happened? Like,
Yeah, for sure.
I guess, in the clubs, like, what's been, do you think, your worst club set, and where was it?
Well, all right. So I remember one time, this is again early on, I was booked in Vancouver, Canada, at Laugh Lines Comedy Club. And I love Laugh Lines. Laugh Lines Comedy Club was the first comedy club in the world that let me headline. They let me headline before I had anything, before Comedy Central, Tonight Show, before anything. Like I was a complete, basically an open micer that used to like do a couple spots around the city. And I remember I went to Vancouver, and through an agent I was working with, he ended up getting me like a hosting spot there. And they let me host. Because in Canada, like the host is over, like the host goes over the feature. Like the feature is the new guy. So the host, the host is like the feature, which kind of makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah, because you get the more experienced person in the harder spot.
Right. So the host was like the most, is behind the headliner. So it's host, feature, headliner, but the feature is like the new guy that does like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So they got me a hosting spot, and they let me host, and they went great. So the club owner, and he sold the club yet. He invited me back to headline. So I went back. The first time I went back to headline, and I was doing it every December. It was great. Like I headlined. It was amazing. Best time of my life. First time headlining. I was like super excited. First time I was the guy doing 45 to an hour. I loved it. It was amazing. So he invites me back the next year, and I'm like, yeah, for sure. Like at this point, this is the only club that's letting me headline. So I'm supposed to go do a Friday, Saturday, 2 nights. And I always used to go in December. And this club in December, they used to do holiday parties. A lot of road clubs would do that, where they sell packages to companies where you could bring your whole office to the show, where you'll go and there'll be a buffet, drinks, like open bar. And then after you can watch a comedy show, which never works because you can't get an office together. They got to behave at the office. Now they're at a party. They don't want to sit down and listen. Like they want to mingle with themselves, So I was supposed to do a Friday, Saturday, and the owner calls me up, or he sends me an email or whatever. He's like, hey, we have a holiday party on Thursday. If you're in town already, because I'm coming from New York, he's like, if you're in town already, we can add that show and you could just like get another show in to make more money. And I'm flying all the way to Vancouver. So I'm like, yeah, because I was going to get in Wednesday. So of course, yeah, I would love to do that, make more money on the trip. No problem. He's like, okay, cool. Listen, it's sold out. It's like 200 people. We got like 200 people sold out. So we're going to have to do it downstairs in the theater because the club has upstairs. It's not the House of Comedy in Vancouver, but it has a upstairs, like that's like a normal room, like 150 seats. But then the theater downstairs fits like 250, 300. And it's like a nice theater. Like you could film a special there. It's like a good theater. So I'm like, this is great. Yeah, for sure. I would love to do it. This is amazing. So I show up on Thursday. I show up to the club and it's like it looks great, but I'm like, this is a party. Like this looks like a party. Like everybody's like having a good time, drinking, mingling. Like it looks like a holiday party. Like I'm like, we're gonna tell all these people to stop what they're doing and
Not
just
having fun.
yeah, and just listen to us. I'm like, this is tough. So I go into the green room. I meet the host and the host and the feature. I'm headlining, and we're talking. We're like, yeah, this is gonna be tough. Like I don't think those people are gonna want to hear it. Like this is brutal. And they're like pretty optimistic. They're like, yeah, nah, but it'll be okay. Like we'll get we can get the host is like, yeah, I'll get them going. It'll be fine. It'll be thing. And I'm kind of trying to like, cause I hate to tell like a host what to do, but I'm kind of trying to like tell them like, hey, when you go up there, like make sure you like let them know what it is. Like don't just go up there and try to ram through your set without giving them like at least rules. Like you don't have to say these are the rules, but just like tell them, hey guys, we're gonna do a show. We need you guys to keep it down. You know, like you have to give them those rules. He was like, yeah, no, I got it. You know, he's like, I host, you know, like I'm a host. Yeah, I got it. The dude goes up there. First of all, his introduction, of course, was garbage. Like they didn't even bother to like get the crowd to sit down. Like so, the crowd is still like they're standing up. Like it's a theater, but the theater is set up weird because there's like it's a theater, but it has tables. Like I don't know if you ever seen like they in Boston they used to film the Comedy Central half hours where it was a theater, but it was tables.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like theater seating.
Right.
So when they bring them up, people are like in the back by the bar, like just full. It's like a party. Like imagine bringing up a stand-up during a party when the people aren't ready for a stand-up. I don't even know if they knew that a stand-up was happening.
Right.
So the owner of the club introduces him. He goes up there, doesn't acknowledge it at all, doesn't ask anyone anything, just goes up there doing material. I'm in the green room upstairs, and there was like a thing where you could look into the theater. I'm in the green room looking up. I'm like, he's literally pretending that nobody's there. Like he's just burning through his material as if nobody's in the room. He's not acknowledging it. He's not addressing no one. Everyone is just talking, and he's just rambling on. 15 minutes he does this. He's supposed to do it for 15 minutes. He does it for like 5. He does like 5 minutes of it and then brings up the feature. Like the feature was in the upstairs, like he's with me, and he just hears his name being announced. He just like has to run down. Like he runs down. Feature runs down. He's on stage. Same thing is happening. They're not paying attention to him at all. The owner comes into the room. It's just me and the host sitting in the green room. The owner comes in and he's like, hey man, I know I booked you for an hour, but I know I booked you for 45. He's like, but just do 30. Like I'll pay you the same, but these people are a little rowdy. Just do 30. I'm like, all right, no problem. He leaves. The feature's on stage having eating it. But I wouldn't even call it eating it because they're not paying attention. Like for you to be eating it, people have to be like getting what you're saying and not laughing.
Yeah.
This is like, just no attention is being given at all. Like he's just, it's like music in the background.
Right.
So, like 5 minutes goes by. The owner comes in again. He's like, hey man, listen, this crowd out there is tough. So you don't even got to do 30. Do 15 and we'll wrap it up. He's like, just do 15. We'll call it a show. That's fine. And I'm like, shit, like, okay. I'm like, all right. Like, I guess I'll do 15. But like, in a way, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, yeah. I flew from New York, I know I had more shows this weekend, but I'm like, I'd like to do a show,
Right.
So the owner comes back in. He's like, because the guy was supposed to do 30. He's like, the guy's at like 12. He's like, I'm going to light him. Like, so you could go up there, just do 15. We'll wrap it up. I'm going to light him. I'm like, all right, whatever. All right. I'll go up there and try to do it. But, the feature before he gets on stage, he tries to like at least mention to the crowd. He's like, hey guys, the headliner like came all the way from New York. Like he's here to tell you guys jokes. So if you guys could like settle down and thing, he's like, I know you guys didn't pay attention to me or the whole, but give the headliner like some attention or whatever. And the crowd go, if they were at like a level 10, they go down to like an 8, like 8. They're like, okay. And they go down to like an 8. The host goes up. I told him do some time to get them more to settle down. Did no time, brings me right up. The host goes up. You guys ready for your headliner? 2 people clap, blah, blah, and brings me up. He brings me on, and it's like the worst. Like I'm just talking, and it's like a full party going on. Like it wasn't like a heckler. Like you hear a full party. Like picture you going in the middle of a party and trying to like do stand up. Like no one's paying attention. It's horrible. I'm like 8 minutes in. I'm doing jokes. I'm trying to talk. I'm doing a thing where where you pause like for a while to get them to like be like, because as long as they just hear talking, they'll just like be like, oh, whatever. But like if it's silent, they'll be like, oh, what happened? Like why is it silent? So I'm sorry. So I'm just doing a thing where I'm pausing or whatever, and occasionally like I'm bombing, but I'm getting a little bit of laughs here and there. Like there's a couple people listening here and there laughing. Now, about 10 minutes in, maybe 15 minutes in, this white lady gets up. She was like one of the people listening in the table. She gets up because what I found out was that all the 200 people there were from the same company.
Okay.
So, that's like, if it were 200 people, but it was like 10 different companies, it's like, okay, you can get people to behave. But when everybody knows each other.
Oh, it's just a huge like frat party.
Exactly. It's impossible. Impossible. So in the middle, I'm like 15 minutes in, like, and you ever have this on stage where you're like, I was only supposed to do 15, but you're like, you know what? I'm bombing, but this isn't that bad. Like I'm still alive. So fuck this. I'm gonna bomb for like I'm gonna keep shit going.
Like if I gotta do this, so do you. You know?
Right. You're like, fuck this. I'm just gonna bomb. I'm just gonna keep this going. Like I wasn't like, cause some people like mail it in and start fucking kamikaze in the show. Like I wasn't doing that. Like I was trying to do well, but like I'm like, whatever. You like this is okay. Like whatever. I'm like out of my head already. I'm like, this is just me reciting jokes. So a lady gets up and she's like, she just starts screaming. She's like, hey, everybody. And I just stay silent. Like, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? She's like, you guys are the rudest people I have ever worked with. This black boy this is a white lady from Canada. She's like, this black boy came all the way from New York City to give us a show. And you guys are being the most disrespectful people I have ever seen. Everybody sit down and shut the fuck up. She just screamed at the top of her lungs, like Mane popping. I'm like silent, and people like look at her and they're like, okay, and they just sit down. Like they all just sit down, and I ended up doing 45. I just did the rest of my set, and it went fine. It went great. The owner came up after me. He was like, I've never seen like that happen ever. Like, and I remember the host and the feature were like, I don't know how that happened. Like this show was like dead. Like, but the woman, she saved me. She like. Because I guess she was like a coworker, she was like a little older, so she was like one of those coworkers where people respect.
Right.
So they just listened to her, and like it went great. Like after those first 15 minutes or so, it went great. And after I got off, I felt like a fucking warrior. I'm like, yeah, I battled out of that shit. Like, so that was like one thing where I'm like, everything. We're in a beautiful theater, beautiful stage, beautiful sound system. Everything is perfect. Everything is supposed to go well. But then it didn't. Right. But then she brought it back. And then the rest of the shows for the rest of the weekend were awesome.
She was like the mom of the group. She was just like,
for sure.
Stop. We're going to turn this party around and we're going home.
Right. So when she did that, like I made a couple jokes about that. And I made a couple jokes and that got laughs. And I started like, cause once I had them, I'm like, because as a comic, we all have, our tricks or our things, or once you're doing it for like a little while, you understand like how to work certain crowds and what certain crowds want. So like when she did that, I was like, while I have their attention, let me talk, let me bring it to them, like, let me not like, I can tell that this crowd might not want to see a show, but maybe if like they're part of the show, I can get them to like be with me. So like, I start like making fun of them a little bit and bringing up job situations and bringing up like, cause I was it was all like these white British Columbia Canadians, and I start making fun of that. And then it was like the one coworker, and I start making fun of that. And then from there, I take it to like, all right, I'm getting laughs here, but I know that I have to, every joke, I have to bring it to them. Like every joke has to somehow be involved. They have to be involved. So
Right.
like when I go into my dating stuff, every dating joke has to be like, are you guys married? You know, like what's going on here? And then you say your dating stuff, you know, like, so they feel like it's just a conversation where we're having. And I dug out of it. And it like those type of shows are so important, like, cause it makes you so fearless and so like able
It,
to like be like, there's nothing gonna be worse than that.
right. It makes you think that like I've done this before worse, so I
Right,
know I could do this. You
right,
know?
right.
And
When I got passed at Broadway Comedy Club in New York, that was one of the first clubs that I got passed on. And at the beginning, like I would only get the 12:45 Friday and Saturday set, 12:45, which is closing 12:45 p.m. set. And a lot of times I wouldn't go up till 1 because the show's running behind. And at Broadway, it's always a battle. Like it was just always, it's just a bunch of tourists. At that time, they're drunk. They don't give a fuck about the show, and you gotta really battle. And you got the wait staff. You're doing checks at the end. Like at the end, that's when they do checks, and the checks are never ready. The checks are never in. So you gotta grind it out. And I remember like always dreading it and always hating it. But like once you do it, you're just like, oh man, I made it through that. Like there's nothing worse that you know that I can do that. That's why like when I finally like when I got passed at the cellar, I was like, this like when some people were like, oh, were you nervous to perform at the cellar? And I was like, no, not I wasn't nervous at all. I mean, this is an audience that's primed to listen to you. Like they listen to you. Like they have no cell phones. If they talk, they'll be dragged out by their face. Security's gonna throw them out. So it's like, no, this is the dream. Like only people I feel like that should fear that is, you know, there's comedians that thrive on the chaos because they don't really have the material. So they need the chaos to
right.
like get this shit going. So those guys should be worried because at the cellar, you're not gonna get the chaos.
You can always tell like those kind of comedians where like a show's going really well for everybody, and then one comic goes up and just starts like shitting on the crowd, and it's like, oh, I see. Like you can't hang with everybody, so you got to go in and sink the ship. You know,
Right.
it's
And they'll always say shit like I meet those comedians you meet them on the road more than anything. Like I meet them all the time and I know who they are because they'll say shit like I love a drunk crowd. I love a rowdy crowd. They'll say shit like that. And I'm like, uh-oh, this
yeah.
guy has no
I always
material.
love to hear like I like when I could turn them against me, and it's like I think you're in this for the wrong reasons. Then you know,
Right. I meet those dudes all the time, dude, that are like, yeah, like I love when a crowd gets crazy and yell shit at me. And I'm like, you don't have material, bro.
yeah, that's
Because
because
nobody that's sitting home writing material loves that.
exactly because we're all like so we love our jokes so much. It's like we want to give you these jokes. Let us give you these jokes.
Right. That's all. Yeah, that's all we care about. So I'm like, you meet that, you run into that so much. So
Yeah. What so that kind of show where you dig yourself out of it, you know, and then you feel like you can do it. You really do. But some people they don't recover from those. And do you have any sort of crazy shows, bombs where you were like on the edge and you were like, I don't know if I'm gonna get through this. Like that bomb that like it almost breaks you, but it doesn't break you, you know?
no, I don't think I've ever had those because every time that things are not going well, I'm able to like get out of my head with it and just be like, okay, things aren't going well, like whatever, like, but you're not dead, like you're not dying, like, you know,
Right.
like I'm always able to minimize. More than that, it like and this happens a lot to comedians. You got to be worried when you have a bomb, when you have two bombs in a row, you have to be careful because it's easy to get into that thing where you're just bombing for like a week.
Right.
Like that happens a lot where you're just like, I can't get a fucking good set. Like what happened? Like
Right.
you go from like having good sets to just a week of like every show you're just bombing. And it usually will happen like at the first one, there'll be like a heckler, you know, a heckler that ruins your set. And you're like, okay, well, that was the heckler's fault. At the second one, then it's the wait staff that like, you know, drops a tray of drinks and that ruins your set. And then by the third one, you just out of rhythm and you're just bombing. And those take me out of my thing more than like just one. I can do just one. I can bomb like one thing, but like those when it's like you feel like you're on a hamster wheel of just bombing.
And
Those
you're,
I'm
this
just like,
ever end? You're like, am I just?
yeah, you just really feel, especially like before, like, because now it's like easier now that I'm able to work some better clubs. It's easier because I can run into like a good crowd
Mhm.
quicker. But at the beginning, like before, when you didn't have, like, you were basically only doing bad shows.
Right.
Like if you're like a new comic who's like on a trajectory to be a comedian, who's like a serious comic, at the beginning, you're just supposed to be the savior of all the bad shows.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what it is. Like, you get booked on all the bad shows, and they'll be like, "All right, you're funny, so save it," you know.
Yeah.
So you end up in that, but it's not easy to do. Like, that's not easy to
Oh,
do.
I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this. Like, I started in Pittsburgh, and I knew it was time to leave when I was getting all the cleanup spots. It was like, you got to go and back cleanup. It's like, but I don't want to. Like,
Right.
this is not beneficial to go and try to save a show that's been going on for an hour and 45 minutes or whatever it is, something crazy.
Dude, I did that. I mean, I think I still am that guy. It wasn't until like I did the Tonight Show that I was able to be like, hey guys, like, maybe don't put me, like, in the worst spot of the show, because everybody, and I was grateful to be booked, but everybody would just book me at the worst spot of the show. Like, and sometimes I would show up there. I would show up, and if the show was going well, they would be like, hold on, and then put up somebody to bomb, and then bring me up to like bring it back, to like try to bring it back, which is like, it's tough. It makes you stronger. It makes you better. But like, after I got like a couple credits, I was able to say like, hey, listen, I'm not driving uptown to do a show in front of a whole audience of drunk that's 2 hours in. Like, so
Yeah, right.
if you want me to do your show, I'll do your show, no problem. But I just need like a better spot.
Yeah, right. It's like, it's the least you can do for me.
Right. Yeah. Those could be tough.
What do you think is your, like, I think all comics have similar ones, but what's your post-bomb, like, coping mechanism? What do you do? Is it like call a comic, drink, eat shit,
I try to stay level headed, because even when I do well, like, I remember myself when I have a night where I have 5 sets and fucking did well in all of them, and I'm happy about all of them. Like, you go home on a high, but when I'm on that high, I try to tell myself like, relax. This is one night, so don't think you're better than you are. Don't think anything. Like, this is one night. Tomorrow's another day. So I always remind myself of that. So when I have the bad sets, I'm able to like remain in the same space where I'm like, relax. This is just one night. This doesn't mean anything. But what I like to do is I enjoy listening to like podcasts, especially like Joe and Mark talking about, like, I was in Austin this week. Second show bombed in front of all my fans. Like, that makes me feel better. Like, listening to shit like that.
To see people that are like doing it with more success or commercial success, like, have those experiences, like, thank God they're doing that as well.
That makes me feel better a lot. Sometimes I've been on the road where I'm like, where you're having like a good, and then you run into that bad show. Because at the beginning, you don't do enough shows to understand that bad shows are pretty normal.
Yes.
Like, so if you only do 10 shows a month, then it's possible that all those 10 shows could be good. But if you do 50 shows a month, 50 is not going to be good. It's possible that out of those 50, 15 would be good.
Yeah, and then you'd be thrilled. You'd be like,
right,
great month. Like, it was
right. So
15 good shows.
When I started going on the road and like headlining more, I realized like the shit of like, because I remember before when I was going on the road as like a feature, and even like when I had a couple dates headlining, I would go on the road and it'd be like do 5, 6 shows, 7 sometimes, and they all would be good.
Yeah.
But like, I started realizing that like, no, on like most weekends, if you're doing 5 shows, if you could get 3 good ones, you had a good weekend.
Right. I mean, you can almost always count that like that Friday late show or Saturday
late show every time.
Audi,
Saturday late show, hit or miss.
Yeah.
Saturday late show could be the best show.
Right. Or it could be like totally wild.
Right.
It's funny because that Friday late show, I know some comics that they're at the level where they're like, we're not doing it. It's like, we're not doing it. And that's I'm so jealous of like that, being able to like get to the point where you could say no to even the bad nights and the bad times.
Yeah.
Because Friday Late Show, people have been up, they've been working. It's the longest they've been awake, you
Yeah.
know?
And a
And
lot of times you have also, a lot of times you traveled that day, you flew in that day, you've been up since the morning traveling,
if you
and
get,
now you're going on stage at midnight.
yes, right. And all these people want to do is like, if they were at home, they'd be falling asleep watching Netflix.
Right.
And now they're trying to stay up to watch you.
Right.
It's insane. I always loved like you have a great Saturday night show, and then Sunday comes if you have a Sunday show, and you're like, damn it, we should have just went home. Like
Yeah.
we all should have went home.
I remember I was opening for Norman at the Stress Factory in Jersey, and we were having a hot week, man. We would just we did Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We would just cooking from like every show, hot. Like I would go up there, do my thing. Norman would come and shut it down. And we ran into that late show Saturday, and I remember I went up there and I was like, oh, like I remember I said to Mark, I was like, he was in, like I said to Mark in the back, I was like, this is gonna be a tough one. Like this is gonna be a tough one. And we just hit the wall. Like there's no explanation. We didn't do anything different, nothing changed, but we just hit the wall. Like and I remember talking to Mark after. He was like, I knew from my first joke, like I'm mailing this in. This is gonna be terrible.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's crazy because like he was like, these are my fans too. Like they came out to see me, and it's still, you know.
And that's so nice to hear. It's like even when you have a room full of fans, it can still not go well. You know?
Right.
Before we wrap up, this is a little cliche, but I'd like to ask all the guests, like, from those early bombs, from those early days, you know, I know you said you kind of feel like the better things almost make you soft, but what do you think is you've learned the most from those early years of bombing and bad crowds and those horrible late check spots? What do you think the thing is that you've taken away the most from those?
I think you learn technique. Like I think for me, like, cause I'm such a student of like the art, and I like to like learn. You just learn technique, and you learn there, like as many people who think like it's just be funny, like just be funny. There's still like techniques to it, and there's still like reasoning behind it. It's not just some like you're funny, be funny, like just be funny, make them laugh. Like there's still techniques. So like from those shows, I've learned like little tricks of the trade of like how to get them back. Is like what to do when this is happening, what not to do, like how to deal with a heckler. What happened when the heckler, you know, this happens a lot when the heckler doesn't mean harm. Like the heckler is enjoying the show and likes you, but is ruining your shit, you know?
Right, yeah.
How to handle that. So I think what I take away from all of that is all technique. And I'm always the guy, like, no matter how's it going on stage, like in my head, I challenge myself and I'm like, dig out of it. Like try to dig out of it. Like even if you don't, try to dig out of it. Let's see if you can dig out of it. And there's no better feeling than shit that starts off thing and you dig out of it. Like that's better than killing from start to finish. Like being in a hole and you're saying, yo, I'm gonna dig out of it, and you like, you know, you stay in the pocket with it, you know, take your fucking jab and you start swinging back, and then you come back, and the crowd, they could tell, like the crowd is with you. That's like, it's like a triumph. You know how like everybody loves a comeback story,
right?
It's like a triumph in 15 minutes, a triumph story where they're like, this dude fought back, and we had him against the ropes, but he, you know, he bobbed and weaved and came back. So I love that more than anything.
I think that's great. I think that's a great way to look at that. And I can't thank you enough for doing this. Ian, tell people where they can find you on social media and where they can hear you, what kind of stuff you got going on, please.
All right. Yeah, I'm on Twitter and on Instagram, mostly on Instagram at Ian Lara, IANLARA, Ian Lara Live on Instagram. And if you search Ian Lara on YouTube, you can see my Comedy Central sets, my Tonight Show, Fallon set, and I got another Comedy Central set coming out later this month, and some HBO stuff coming out at the end of the summer. So if you guys want to follow me, you can follow me on that.
That's awesome. Thanks, man. I really appreciate you doing this. And
thank you, man. Thank you for having me, and I hope to see you back on stage soon, man.
Yeah, man. Take it easy.
All right. Later.
Later.